Greetings and welcome to a very special edition of Public Eye, a production of the Department of Information and Public Relations. I am Acting Chief Information Officer Desiree Smith, and I'm joined by Supervisor of Elections, Ms. Juliette Penn. Ms. Penn will be informing us about the upcoming 2015 general elections. Welcome, Ms. Penn.
Thank you very much
for making yourself available to ensure that the voting public is well informed. All right, Mrs. Penn, give us some background information on the foundation of elections and its processes, please.
Elections are due in the Virgin Islands every 4 years. And the purpose of election is to elect persons to represent the Virgin Islands. We have 9 districts. We have one central electoral district, which is known as the Territorial at-Large District. And we use those districts to have people represent us. The election is also a time in which the general public exercise their right to vote. And the supervisor of election is responsible for the general direction and supervision of the registration of voters, the administrative aspect of the elections, and making sure that all election officers are fair, impartial, and comply with the provisions of the Elections Act.
Okay. Since the announcement of polling day, what has been the response of the public regarding voter registration?
The response has been tremendous. We have had quite a few persons registered. As a matter of fact, we had about, for the last 2 days, because after the dissolution of the House of Assembly, we had 2 days in which to complete our final registrations. Okay. And for that 2 days, we had approximately 1,200 persons who came in to either to be registered or to be transferred from district to district. So the result has been tremendous.
Tremendous response. Mm-hmm. So when were the elections due constitutionally?
Constitutionally, elections are due every 4 years. Mm-hmm. So we had election in 2011, November, and the latest election could be held for this new election. The latest time between February and March 2016. Okay. That is the latest time, but election could be called any time before that time, within the election period. Okay. It's all up to the Premier.
Who is responsible then for determining the date of election, and what is that process?
The Premier is responsible for determining the date of the election. He, in consultation with, he informs the governor as to when he wants to have elections. Mm-hmm. And then he also speaks with the elections office to find out the readiness of the election office in order to proceed with the elections. Okay. So, the Premier is ultimately responsible for the calling of elections.
We know then that the announcement of polling day is June 8th, mm-hmm. and that gives the voting public approximately a month to determine how they would cast their vote in the upcoming election. Mm-hmm. So how has that time frame affected your preparation for the general election?
Well, it has put us in high gear a lot faster than we expected, but we are on time and we are making our processes work. We have, I think the biggest hurdle we had was the 2 days of registration and getting the list out on time, the preliminary list. And that was done within 4 days. Within 4 days, and we were able to accomplish that. And I think that all the other duties that are supposed to be done, we are well within our range and we are ready. We are ready.
So preparation has always been the mode of your...
Yes, we have been in preparation mode, but now we are on, what you call it, high alert? Yeah, we're definitely on high alert right now.
Indeed. some have referred to the calling of this election as a snap election. That term, snap election, is this in fact a snap election?
It's not a snap election. You call it an early election or something else. But because within the 4 years, we are within the 4-year period. So election can be called anytime within that time frame. It doesn't have to be exactly 4 years, which would have been 4 years from the date of election, which would have been November the 7th, or 4 years from the first sitting of the House of Assembly, which would have taken us up to February, March. So election can be called anytime within that time period. It doesn't have to be November, it didn't have to be then. So it's not a snap election, it's just an early election.
I know that the voter registration concluded on May 5th, and the preliminary voters list was available for inspection from the 11th to the 14th of May. What is the next step after the inspection of that list?
The next step, we are to make sure that all the notices of objections or claims, if there are any, and we have had some, not objections, we have had some claims, quite a few claims, and those are cosmetic. The claims basically relate to change of name, change of addresses, and change of occupation. You know, people say the address was wrongly stated or the occupation is wrongly stated, and they may have to make a claim in order to do that. That is the only time that we can do that, when we have a preliminary list. So the next step on our agenda after Thursday, is to make sure all those corrections are done and have the list ready to go, have the revised list, which will be the final voters list, out to the public by the 20th of May.
Okay. Sorry. Very good. What then is the relationship with the Elections Office and the Department of Civil Registry and Passport Office to identify the deaths in the territory and the process to remove these persons from the voters registration list?
The law allows us to remove persons from the voters list. In order to get that information, we have a relationship with the Civil Registry where we can go to we have to apply to them every quarter, and we go in, we are able to access their database and to go in and check to see, how many persons we had deceased within the last whatever quarter, last month, and we are able to take those persons' name from our voters list. We also do several, apart from the Civil Registry, we also check with ZBVI to get the names of all deceased persons, and we funeral booklets as well to make sure that we do take off the persons that are deceased.
The public has become aware that a form of identification is being required by registered voters on polling day specifically. Is that correct? And what form of IDs are required? What would be an appropriate form of ID to prove that you are the voter? And what should we be aware of?
Okay. We were hoping that we would have had our voters' registration cards for this election. But because of the time frame in which the election was called, we were not able to produce the quantity of cards that would be needed right now for the elections. What we have been doing, we have been collecting the information. So we have information to begin to run the cards, but we don't have the quantity yet to go ahead. And because the elections was held when they were held, we were hoping that elections would have been later, and then we would have had more time to get all all the things that we need to do in order to process the cards. But we were unable to do that. So what we're asking the general public to walk to the polls with a form of ID, whether it be a passport, a driver's license, belongers card, any ID that you have with, preferably with a picture. But I want to emphasize here that if persons do not have an ID, they will not be disenfranchised from voting. We still have to allow that person to vote. You would use the same manner that we've used all these years. You would have to say your name, your address, and that sort of thing, and your occupation. But if you have an ID, that would be ideal. It would help us to identify you better.
Okay, wonderful. Any other adjustment to the process on polling day that the voting public needs to be aware of? Maybe what they should bring, what they shouldn't bring, other than a ID?
We are going to request the public also to leave our cell phones, either to leave them in the car for the moment that they're, or to give them to somebody to hold for them while they're going into the polls. We are going to be requesting that cell phones are not allowed inside the polling, inside the polling booth when you actually go into to vote. We may ask you to leave them at the front, or you may leave it with somebody, or you may leave it in your car. But we do not want persons to go in to use the cell phones to take pictures of the ballots, and because that is an offense. So to avoid that, we're asking them not to walk with the cell phones into the polling area.
What other measures are available for people who are eligible to vote but they missed the deadline? This is in fact an early election, so if they miss the registration deadline, what provisions are there?
That's it. There's nothing else that can be done presently. I would like to remind persons at this time that we have continuous voter registration. And that means that we are open every working day of the year for registration. So there's no need not to be registered.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 18 years and you attain 18 years tomorrow, you should come into the elections office. If you obtain a belongers card, you should come into the elections office to be registered. That is how it is. So if you were only given a window of 2 days, and that is because we have continuous voter registration. We also produce a voters list every year on the 30th of September. And people are given the same opportunity to inspect the preliminary list, to make changes. So, so we don't end up in this, and what we ended up in, or some people ended up in, because some people would be disenfranchised because at the last minute you came in, your documents are not in order. Yes. We don't have any way of getting in contact with you. So there's no other option right now. If you come into the office and you register now, it goes for the next election.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Penn, for the information that we have received thus far. This is a special edition of Public Eye on the 2015 general elections. We will take a brief break, and when we return, we will learn more about the electoral process. We will be right back with more from the Supervisor of Elections.
There are so many ways you and I can help conserve energy at home, school, and work. We can also start by turning off the lights when we leave a room. Old fluorescent lights burn more energy than LED lights, which are energy efficient. So let's open up the shades and let in some light. Also, make sure that the AC is at optimal level instead of freezing cool. But in this case, let's just turn it off. There are many ways to conserve energy at work, like minimizing hot water usage and turning down the refrigerator dial for crying out loud. Remember these tips to improve energy sustainability and build our economy for a better tomorrow. Just turn up the light.
Welcome back to this very special edition of Public Eye on the upcoming 2015 general elections. I am joined by Supervisor of Elections, Ms. Juliette Penn. Ms. Penn, what does it mean when the governor issues the writs of election?
When the governor issues writs of election, it means that the time for nomination day, election day, where the elections will take place, and that sort of information is given in the writ. It is also the authority for the returning officers to proceed with nomination elections, that information is what is given on the writ. The writ also it's returnable to the governor the day after elections, and that is returnable with the name of the person who has been elected for that particular district.
Okay, that's a number of components in the writs. So as it relates to nomination day, what is nomination day?
Nomination day is the day in which candidates are actually nominated for the candidacy. That is the day that you know for sure who are actually taking part in the elections. We are open for nomination day from, from 10 to 1 p.m. and from 2 to 4 p.m. If at 4 o'clock only one person was nominated, that one person would be declared elected for that particular district.
Indeed.
If there are more than one person, then the returning officer prepares for election for that particular district. If at the territorial at large, there are only 4 persons nominated, those first 4 persons would be elected automatically. There would be no need for a territorial electoral election. So those are the things that happen on nomination day. Nomination day, the candidate has to be nominated by 2 persons. And those persons are to be persons who are within that particular district. 2 registered voters from within that particular district. The candidate does not necessarily have to be from that district. But the persons who are going to nominate them are going to be persons from within that district. They also need to walk with a witness, one witness, preferably from within the district as well, and $500.
There are fees.
There are fees.
Okay.
Fees of $500.
Indeed.
At the territorial electoral nomination, the persons who are going to nominate the candidates can be from anywhere within the territory because it's territorial.
Of course.
So they will also have to work with their two persons to nominate them, $500 and a witness as well.
Very good. And where is this process held? Where are the nominations
We are
held?
going to have nomination in all 9 districts. We would be at different places there would be one nomination station in every district. For instance, at in Rotong, the nomination for the 4th district would be at the courthouse. In Eastern, it would be at the community center, and so forth. But in due time, we would give the places where nomination would be held. And for the territorial at large, the nomination station would be at the Briarcliff Center.
Yeah. Commonly known as a
cultural center.
Indeed.
So,
yes, of course. All right, good. So we know where we went. We're going to know where we have to go.
yes.
And what are the qualifications for nomination of a prospective candidate?
In order to be nominated, you must be 21 years old, a registered voter, a BV Islander.
Pretty simple. Okay. Conversely then, what constitutes disqualification of a prospective candidate on nomination day?
The job of the election office and the returning officers, we are not to disqualify or qualify. We are simply there to take a nomination.
Oh.
The onus is on the candidate as to whether he or she qualifies or not. That onus is not on the elections office.
Okay. Tell us about your team. Is there a deputy supervisor of elections and others?
Yes, we have a deputy. She came on stream today, actually. Her name is Miss Lorna Christopher. We have additional support staff in the person of Miss Althea Crandall. And we have our we had the staff of the elections office, Miss Jennings, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Bradwith, along with myself. We also will have on stream for the elections because, you know, it's, you know, we need a whole lot of people to work for us.
Indeed.
So we would have the returning officers. So we have 10 returning officers. We're going to have about 23 polling stations. So we're going to have presiding officers for each of those polling stations, 2 presiding officers for each of those polling stations. We're going to have polling clerks for each of the polling stations. We're going to have messengers. We're going to have tally clerks. We're going to have counters. We're going to have, you name it, we're going to have it, because we're going to need that additional staff in order to have the process run smoothly.
Yes, so you need a full cohort of people.
Yes, and we do have those persons.
Very good. Tell us, what qualifies an individual to vote in the Virgin Islands?
In order to vote in the Virgin Islands, in order to be qualified to vote in the Virgin Islands, the individual, he or she must belong to the Virgin Islands and be 18 years of age. They must be domiciled and resident in the Virgin Islands on the qualifying day, which would be the day on which they come to be registered. Or on that date, the person must be domiciled in the Virgin Islands and resident in the United States Virgin Islands. That qualifies you to vote. But we also have to take into account that any person who was qualified to be registered as a voter immediately before the commencement of the new constitution in 2007 shall continue to be so qualified to register to vote. Sorry.
And then what would result in an individual being disqualified from taking part in voting?
The disqualifications are if a person is certified to be insane or otherwise adjudged to be of unsound mind under any law enforced in the Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
If that person is under the law, has been registered as a voter for the purposes of he's disqualified if he has been convicted of an offense relating to elections. You're disqualified. You're disqualified if you're under sentence of death by the courts. Those are some of the disqualifications.
Okay. Those who are qualified to cast a ballot then, in what instances, how does an individual cast their ballot? And how would it be then acceptable or rejected?
An individual casts a ballot by coming into the, going to the polling station, the respective polling station. But remember that persons are only to go to polling stations where they are registered. You can only vote where you're registered. So you go to the polling station, you're given, you give your name, address, occupation. You show us some sort of ID. Mm-hmm. You're then given a ballot paper, and you're asked to proceed to one of the many booths, and you mark your ballots. You come back, you give it to the presiding officer, and you do not leave the polling station until the presiding officer puts that ballot into the ballot box. And then you are given the second ballot to go and for the territorial at large. Then you come back and you do the same thing, and then you're asked to leave the polling station immediately.
Okay. Can a ballot be rejected?
Yes, a ballot can be rejected, but that is after, that's during the counting. We call those rejected ballots. Mm-hmm. At the polls, though, persons can have a spoiled ballot, mm-hmm. which means that when you go into the polling booth, if you think you've made a mistake or you made an error and you want to correct it, you can come back to the presiding officer and ask for a second ballot. And you would be given one, and a note would be made accordingly that you were given a second ballot. And then you can go back into the to the polling booth and have your ballot marked properly. But those are referred to as spoiled ballots.
Okay. So then if a voter resides in a district other than the one that individual is registered in, which district is that individual to vote in? You're
to vote in the district in which you're registered. let me clarify that.
Yes, please.
Okay? I am registered in Easton. I'm living in Weston. I have to go to Easton to register, to vote.
Okay.
I have not made a change, so I have to register I have to vote where I'm registered.
To vote. But you can change.
You
where
can
you're
make that change, but if that change was not made, you ought to go back to Easton to register, to vote, sorry.
Indeed. Very good. What is advanced polling and who qualifies for such?
Advanced polling is held 2 days approximately before the general elections. At the advanced polling, we have all persons who are working for election officers. All election officers are required to vote at the advanced polling. All police officers, and then we have the elderly persons who are sick, who have problems, who are, who be considered elderly persons, or if you have problems with you may not be elderly, but you may be blind, or you may be not able to walk properly.
Indeed.
But those are the persons who we try to get to the polls for advanced poll. And when we say elderly, we do not mean anybody who is 45 or 55 years old. We are talking about anybody over 65 to 70 years old. That is the age range which we're looking for.
Okay.
You may not, I can guarantee you're not going to find all of those persons coming to the poll on advanced polling day.
Right.
Because some of those persons want to be a part of the mix on election day. So they do still come, but persons who have difficulty reading and, illiterate persons or persons who need help, anybody that needs help, that you have to help, we expect them to come to the polls on advanced polling day.
Okay.
So now that does not mean that everybody would decide that they need help.
Right. So those that do and identify that they need help will be open to coming on advanced polling day.
Let me clarify that again. It's advanced polling day is for election officers, police officers, elderly people.
Yes.
But if there's a person, if there's a younger person who we know or that is unable to perhaps stand for a long period of time or something like that, we may accept them on advanced polling day.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Penn, for the information that we have received thus far. This is a special edition of Public Eye on the 2015 general elections. We will take a brief break, and when we return, we will learn more about the electoral procedures.
There are so many ways you and I can help conserve energy at home, school, and work. We can also start by turning off the lights when we leave a room. Old fluorescent lights burn more energy than LED lights, which are energy efficient. So let's open up the shades and let in some light. Also, make sure that the AC is at optimal level instead of freezing cool. But in this case, let's just turn it off. There are many ways to conserve energy at work, like minimizing hot water usage and turning down the refrigerator dial for crying out loud. Remember these tips to improve energy sustainability and build our economy for a better tomorrow. Just turn up something.
Welcome back to this very special edition of Public Eye about the upcoming 2015 general elections. I am joined by Juliette Penn, Supervisor of Elections. Ms. Penn, please advise the public on the procedures at polling day.
On polling day, the polls would be open at 6 a.m. territory-wide, and they would close at 6 p.m. During that time, the ballot boxes, before the polls are open, the duty of the returning officer, presiding officer, poll clerk, make sure that everything is in order at the polling stations. The ballot boxes would then be given to the presiding officer along with the keys. Those ballot boxes are to be emptied before everyone that is there, to make sure that there's nothing in those ballot boxes. And then the votes that were taken on advanced polling day are to be counted without the being open and placed in the ballot box. You put them in and you count them 1, 2, 3, so that everybody knows how many votes were put in there. And after that, the box, that all this happened after the box has been emptied and locked. After that is done, the box is placed on a table in an open area in front of everybody, so it's visible by the presiding officers, poll clerks, agents, and the voting public. And then persons are asked to proceed to vote. The presiding officer is a person who says how many persons are to be within the polling station at any one time.
Yes, please expound on that.
The presiding officer who are permitted to come inside.
Yeah.
The persons who are permitted to come inside the polling station are the presiding officer, poll clerks, police officer on duty, agents of candidates, candidates themselves, but they and the agents are only to be there for 5 minutes together. Okay. Then one has to go, or the other. And the returning officer, did I say that?
No, you didn't.
Yeah. The supervisor elections are also allowed to be inside the polling station, and the deputy supervisor. But those are the only persons that should be inside a polling station, and the persons who are coming in to vote. So the presiding officer is responsible for the order that is kept at the polling stations. They are the person who say how many persons are to come in. Yes. And they are the persons who say, well, look, you're finished voting, you have to leave the station. If they are given any problems, then they ask for assistance from the police. But the person in charge of that polling station is the presiding officer.
Okay. Okay, good. And if gross misconduct is to ensue, what's the reporting process on that?
Well, if there's gross misconduct, then you ask the police officer for assistance. Right? That's how that goes. Police officer doesn't, you have to ask him to, well, we're having difficulty with this person, and if you need him to be removed from the polling station, then you ask the police officer. During the time of, apart from the presiding officer, we also have the poll clerks who are responsible for entering all the information in the poll book, your name, your address, and at the end of the time when you're finished voting, they put in the book, voted, so you know that that particular person voted already. So if somebody comes and say, well, okay, I am John Doe, and you can also always check to see, well, if that person was there before. But, you always have a good, the agents do a very good job of checking as well, because their job is to check to make sure that the person's names are taken off the same way, that only one ballot paper or two, in the instance of territorial and district, are given to the person. So they are the watchdogs for the candidates, the agents who are in the polling station.
Okay, very good. So what measures are in place to assist elderly voters when they arrive at the polling stations and people with special needs?
Well, we are hoping that those persons with special needs will come on the advanced poll. But if those persons come on election day, they cannot be turned away. They also have to be given their right to vote. We have, if you need assistance and you come to the polling station, you ask for assistance. then the presiding officer and the agents of all candidates that are present would have to go in the polling booth with you in order for the presiding officer to mark your ballot for you. And the presiding officer has to mark that ballot for the person that you asked them to mark that ballot for. However, the law provides that persons can walk with a friend to go to mark their ballot. In that instance, the presiding officer nor the agent does not go. And we expect the friend to do as the person asks them to do. But you can only be a friend to one person. You cannot come with 5 persons and go in 5 times to vote for them. You only can be a friend to one person. So the law provides that you can, if you do not want, because you have difficulty with people who doesn't want everybody to see for whom they have voted. So if you ask for assistance, that would happen, because the presiding officer and the agents, all the agents, would have to go in and see who you voted for.
Right.
But if you come with a friend, then the friend goes in with you, and only the friend goes in with you.
What then are some of the election offenses that are to be avoided on polling day?
We have a number of election offenses. For instance, intoxicating liquor is not to be sold on election day at all. Once there's an election in that particular district, there are supposed to be no liquor being sold between the hours of 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. After 6, you can sell, but you're not supposed to sell intoxicating liquor between those times. Then we have another offense where we have employers who may not want to allow the employees to sufficient time to vote. Employers are to give the employees reasonable time, a reasonable period for voting. And no employer should make any deduction from any pay that is due to that person, or impose or exact from them any penalty by reason of his absence during that period. So employers, please take note that you are to give your employees reasonable time, a reasonable time. I cannot say 2 hours, because sometimes you stand in line for more than 2 hours. But whatever, it should be a reasonable time. And you're not to deduct any pay from that person, or you're not to try to intimidate them in any way about not being there at a particular time. This offense carries a fine of $500 and imprisonment for 6 months. So if persons are not allowed, and then it's brought to the proper authority, that is a penalty for that. Election officers also have penalties, and they are to make sure that everything is done fairly and impartially. That is if they don't do that, there's a penalty for that, and they would be guilty of an offense which is indictable, and it carries a fine of $3,000 and imprisonment for 2 years. Some of the acts that are prohibited on election day, some of the other acts is that you're not to campaign on election day. Okay. You're to stop all campaigning at whatever time, 12 in the evening. Yep. You're not to have any loudspeakers. You're not to have any banners up. You're not to use the colors, your colors. You're not to use anything relating to the what do you call it?
To the campaign.
To the campaigning. Yeah, you're not supposed to do that on polling day. You're not supposed to have any advertisement on the radio. You're not supposed to have any advertisement on television. All of your pictures and posters are to be taken down by election day, by 12, on the night before election. And you're not supposed to have anything saying on you vote for, and no broadcast or any of that sort should be done on election day. And those carry a penalty of $1,000 and imprisonment of 12 months. Then we have bribery. You're not supposed to try to bribe anyone to vote any particular way. You're not to interfere with anybody who's standing in line. And then we have those. Then we have treating. You're not supposed to try to get anybody to vote for you by offering them food and drinks and those sort of things during election time. And it's a whole lot of other offenses, and we would put them out closer to the time so that people would know.
That would be good. Because
there's a penalty for bribery. For instance, bribery carries a penalty of, if it's an election officer has committed bribery, treating or undue influence, trying to get somebody to vote for somebody that they shouldn't, that they want them to do. The election officer, there's a fine of $10,000 and imprisonment for 6 months. Any other person, there's a fine of $500 and imprisonment for 6 months. So I would like everyone to be careful as to how they try to influence anybody, how you try to, because, you have people, sometimes you have people in line and then other persons come in and pass in little slips of paper and stuff like that. If that is found out, and you can be charged. So there are quite a few offenses that people need to be aware of.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Penn. The public is no doubt very clear on the offenses and their need to steer clear of them. In closing, Ms. Penn, please explain to our audience the importance of persons exercising their right to vote.
The right to vote is yours, all of us. If we are registered, we're entitled to vote. And I think it's extremely important that people exercise their right to vote. There are places where people would die for the right to vote, and we have that right. We are free to do it. And many of us do not wish to exercise that right. But I would encourage everyone to vote. It's your right. And in voting, you have a say as to what happens in your country. You have a right to make a noise then if something doesn't go right. That, well, I put you, or I voted for you, I voted you in there, and we expect you to run the country accordingly. So you have a voice. Your vote is your voice. So that's why I think that people should use that voice, which is your vote, to run your country.
I would like to thank Supervisor of Elections, Ms. Juliette Penn, for joining me to share with us information on all the important matters concerning the 2015 general elections. This has been a special edition of Public Eye, a production of the Department of Information and Public Relations. For more information on the 2015 general elections and other government news, please log on to our website at bvi.gov.vg and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at BVI Government. I am Acting Chief Information Officer Desiree Smith. Thank you.